Dave has a background from the JKMRC, so we should persuade him to come and give a seminar. And he gracefully agreed to, just a few weeks' notice, jump in. I really appreciate that. And I've met Dave on and off over the years. Had over 10 years at the JK doing a master's and then working on the original Summit. And then inspired by wanting to do something a bit different, went off to start his own business, which those who've started businesses know, yeah, you are going out on a limb when you start your own business, and with a new product, you are taking quite a big personal risk to get out there to deliver what you have faith in that you can. So Dave has an amazing worldwide coverage with his software, and I know very strong in coal as well. So I think it's going to be really interesting to us to see how you take the story of taking the vision into something that's really useful in industry. So welcome, Dave. Over to you.
Thanks, Malcolm. Good morning, good evening, good day to everybody at various parts of the world. The way I'm planning to run things, firstly, my screen should be shared. If you can't see it, it should be there on the shared screen. See if you can find it. I plan to spend the first 10 minutes, 15 minutes going through the history of developing Limn and some of the pitfalls that I ran into and some of the good parts of it. And then I'll spend perhaps half an hour giving a demonstration of the package, and then leave about a quarter of an hour for questions and comments and discussion at the end of it. If you find that I'm speaking too quickly, or I tend to get enthusiastic and if not waving my arms around it, at least going faster. So please ask me to slow down. So looking at the screen, keeping it simple in simulation, 30 years out on a limb. It's certainly been a different way to spend a career. I worked for various companies in the Australian mining industry for about 10 years before I went to the JK Centre. And I guess I was the sort of person that fitted into work research type groups. And unfortunately, those groups have decreased in number drastically over the last 30 or 40 years. Had they been going still, I possibly would have ended up in one of those. But I went to the JK and it felt like coming home. It was an amazing place to spend some time. So the story of Limn. Why, when and where? It was a midlife crisis, really. What do you do in a midlife crisis? You can buy a fast car, train a racehorse, sail around the world, or you can develop software, and that was where I ended up. It was almost exactly 31 years ago, end of February in '94. I told Dr. McKee that I was planning on leaving, and when he'd finished wailing and gnashing his teeth, he wished me well. And my wife said, starting your own business, we were based in Brisbane at the time at the JK Centre, that means we can live in Adelaide again, can't we? And she's from Adelaide. So the quid pro quo for having permission to start my own business was for a move to Adelaide. So we've been in Adelaide for the remainder of the time. But where did the whole thing begin? 3 years before I left the JK, we'd had a navel gazing exercise where we'd looked at the call for simulators, where we'd positioned JK SimMet and so on. And we'd identified three levels. The big fish, if you like, the Aspens and perhaps the Syscads, packages that might sell somewhere between 100 and 500 licenses worldwide, we thought at that stage. Then there was the middle-sized fish like JK SimMet, which we thought might sell at their most somewhere between 500 and 1,000 licenses. I've got no idea how many licenses there are currently for Aspen, for instance, around the world, or for JK SimMet for that matter. So if anybody would like to fill me in on that later, I'd be interested to know. But the category that I was interested in, I guess, was the little fish. And we'd called this the sprat to catch the mackerel, the small fish to get people interested in simulation and us as providers of simulation services. And the potential for that could be anywhere up to 10,000 licenses, we thought. 3 years on from that navel gazing exercise, nothing had happened, and I was looking for a change. I'd been at the JK for more than 10 years. I'd been 10 years with JK Tech, and a couple of years before that working on the very first version of a graphics process simulator, my master's thesis. And I thought there was an opportunity that I could fill. And of course, it was a midlife crisis, so I had to find something to do. The first thing you've got to do when you look at developing software is to come up with a name. And one of the most important things to do is to find one that's got a catchy name that grabs people's attention. You know, something like Word, something that's really, really different and interesting. So we tried to register FlowDraw and FlowSolve as trademarks for the package. Software is not patentable, but at least a trademark protects your name. And FlowDraw and FlowSolve seemed like reasonable descriptions of what we were going to do. And the patent lawyer that was organising the trademark said, "Don't be silly, those names will have gone already. There's no way you'll get that. Try and find something that's a little more unique." So we looked at a dictionary and found the word limb. Now, limb sounds different, and it allows various bad puns like sitting out on a limb and so on. So it seemed like a reasonable fit. The name is actually an Old English word, not in common usage, although I was reading a book a couple of days ago when I came across someone who'd limned something, which is an unusual thing to find. It means to depict by drawing, or to illuminate, or to outline with light. And that could perhaps be the light around the edges. So it seemed like a reasonable fit to the sort of thing I was hoping to put together. The other interesting part of the name, I guess, is that it describes the process of making illuminated manuscripts. The illumination there, the people that made the manuscripts were called limners, and you'll see references occasionally to that. So those beautiful illuminated manuscripts, limbs related to those as well. And we picked up that illumination, I guess, or that graphic a little bit with our Limn logo. The software, I'd originally planned to build a system from scratch. In other words, starting without any other built-in packages. But I was commissioned to do a small piece of work in Excel, taking the Lynch-Rao cyclone model and making it usable by students at the Uni of Queensland Department of Mining and Met. A guy called John Davis roped me in to do that. And for me, that was a road to Damascus moment. It was a light, I saw the light, not just around the edges. I'd not used a spreadsheet much in anger before. This is 1994. Spreadsheets were around, but not really used in engineering as much as they are now. And there were several varieties of them. But in terms of a simulator, I realised that a lot of the data entry and the charting and user manipulation of data, macro language was all already part of a package. And if I could find a way to iron out some of the wrinkles of using a spreadsheet in that sort of environment, that it would be a worthwhile exercise. So my goal, I guess, was to build a simulation package as a layer over the spreadsheet and to try and get the best from both worlds. I picked Excel, luckily, it being the sole remaining horse, really, because of the documentation that Microsoft provided. There was a software developers kit book, there was a CD, and various people from particularly the quants, I guess, the people from the financial industries who had pushed calculation methods of trying to predict what was going to happen, were big on using Excel as a front end for things, and so I could leverage some of what they'd done as well. I'd written a simulation package previously, obviously JK-SimMat, but never programmed in Windows or in C++ or used Excel in anger. So there wasn't much chance of getting any venture capital to start my development based on my business plan. So I locked myself up for 9 months and got into it. And this is about April '94. not top-down programming, but head-down, tail-up programming. It may not be some people's idea of fun, but I had a great time. 100% focus, no interruptions, no meetings, no reports. It's probably the most effective work period I've ever had, and it was actually very enjoyable. My family were great. We'd moved to Adelaide, we were renting a house, and there was only air conditioning in the lounge room. So that became my office, and I had the view and the air conditioning. And of course, the first Christmas here was hot. And my wife still reminds me about the fact that I wouldn't let her use the lounge room where I had my office while we sweltered in the heat for Christmas lunch. So by the end of 94, I had a package of sorts, and I had to start thinking about marketing it. And one of the first tasks is to pick a price. And I looked at JK Simmet and said about a third of that seems like a reasonable number. So that's where the first estimate of what the thing was worth started, I guess. I decided on the basis of what we'd done with Simmet as well to use the dongle as a license control tool. And I took the first version of the software to the Mill Operators Conference at Roxby Downs in the end of 94. Now, it was a pretty basic package at that stage, but I was offering people alpha test versions at a reduced price, and with the promise to upgrade to later versions as they became available. And I found enough people interested at that stage to put their hands up and say that they'd be willing to do that. We received the first order for the software in November and the first check soon after, but I spent the check on a new fax machine because in those days the cheapest way to get a fax was to put it in a card in a PC, and my PC card missed the half of the first order, so it seemed pretty sensible to spend the first check on a fax machine. It became fairly obvious from the alpha tester feedback that the basic version that I developed, it was quite capable of drawing flow sheets, but you had to build your own model in Excel and then manually link it to the flow sheet. That wasn't going to fly, that there had to be a better way of doing it. And again, John Davis, who was responsible for my getting into Excel in the first place, suggested that some sort of wizard, some sort of helper tool to enable people to more easily set up data structures and template models and things was necessary. So the last couple of months of 94, I spent doing that. Still very generic, but it was a step up from where it had been at the Mill Operators Conference. One of the coal guys suggested that the coal plants already had basic models that were available and were fairly well defined in what they wanted to do. Unlike a focus on flotation with surface properties and the difficulty of modelling that sort of environment, coal tends to be particle solids based, and that was something that worked in my favour, I guess, when I started. That led to the first version of Limn Coal Wizard, mid-95, which gave us a size by SG two-dimensional stream structure and primitive separation curve models. The next thing you have to do, of course, once you've got software, is to write documentation. I don't like writing documentation, so I've argued that the user documentation is probably best written by someone other than the developer. So I employed a chem engineer to prepare a series of tutorial approach PFDs, that should be. Sorry, the PDFs, isn't it? PFDs, a process flow diagram. Training also was something that I set up at that stage and gave a couple of basic courses. It's historically been a 2-day face-to-face arrangement, individual PC based and up to 8 users at a time, very tutorial based. I demonstrate, people copy through, I walk around and look at what they're doing and give immediate feedback. One of the things we found, having come through 20 years or so from the development of the PDF approach to documentation was that the newer generations prefer video to text, and there's quite a push to make video versions of the documentation, I guess. I'm less in favour of that. Personally, I find I learn better from reading, but perhaps that's just a measure of how ancient I am. The other thing that changed was the face-to-face courses, which couldn't be run during COVID, and there was a fair bit of push, I guess, to run courses like this over Teams. Now, I find that it's not suited well to giving tutorial type courses, and perhaps you'll see why when I go through and give a demonstration at the moment, and imagine you're trying to learn the package from that. The difficulty is me not being able to see what people are doing and being able to pick up where they've got problems and so on. So since COVID, we've resumed face-to-face courses where possible, but some groups are still preferring the cheaper version, I guess, of online courses. So I don't have to go to an overseas venue to run a course, so that works out quite a bit cheaper. And we're still working through how to make that sort of thing work. Just a note on the comment at the bottom there, I came across a couple of days ago, bloody instructions which being taught return to plague the inventor. For those who don't know Australian English, bloody in the Macbeth sense was specific to blood. In Australia, it's a much more general adjective. Coming back to marketing the package historically, the Coal Wizard proved to be a very useful approach, and a company in Brisbane became agents for the software for me there, and they sold 40 licenses to the coal industry over the next 3 to 4 years, which was a pretty major kick, I guess, to get started. In 1998, at a International Coal Congress in the Gold Coast, I met Peter Hand from South Africa, and his group had a similar set of interests to the Clarkson group, and we set up a similar arrangement. And since that date, that group sold over 250 licenses in South Africa and Africa in general. So that's also been a very useful adjunct, I guess. It became obvious that having someone else handle local marketing and support was very useful. And subsequently, we developed relationships with other people in Australia so that I get support and don't have to handle everything in Australia. In the US and Canada, thanks, Bob. In South America, Transmin. In Mongolia, an engineer who worked in Melbourne and had been exposed to Limn went back to Mongolia and is now running an engineering group there. And they're marketing Limn there for me, and we've sold a couple of licenses, so that's great as well. And of course, South Africa with Peter's group. I look after the sort of second level of support. If there's something that the guys can't handle locally, the normal things are finger trouble, where somebody's done something that is reasonably obvious if you have some experience with the software, and the local guys are able to pick that up. They're also able to do the chase up for prospective clients and answering emails and so on. So that relieves the overall workload considerably. Over the years, the different people have been involved in doing that. Some have disappeared altogether, and new people have come along. In early 2000, De Beers purchased Coal Wizard to start to try and model the size by density separation processes, and Kurt Peterson, an engineer there at the time, was keen to set up something which could handle size by SG data with a diamond distribution in each size by SG interval. So we set up the Diamond Wizard, and having done that work, I was able to pull back some of those more user-friendly, if you like, ideas into the second generation suite of Limn Wizards, which became the basis of the Limn Wizard back add-on as we see it now. And these had the ability to set up the data structures, but also to provide template process models, run multiple times so that they can be used to maintain a model in a workbook or to make changes if required. So I'm going to go on and, that's my 20 minutes, we're doing okay. Go on and give a demonstration if I can work out how to change what my screen's looking at. Just bear with me for a few moments. Oh, almost seamless. Does that appear to be working? Yes, good. So Limn is an Excel hosted system. In other words, it lives underneath Excel. You run Excel first and then run Limn. The critical thing, I guess, or the very first thing to handle with Limn was the first part of any modern simulation system, to be able to draw a flow sheet. The graphical interface to a flow sheet seems to have become pretty standard and certainly makes a lot of sense. Excel isn't the easiest thing in the world to draw a flow sheet in its native state, and the tools to do it are not obvious when you start. So after quite a bit of effort, the way I came up with it was actually to get inside Excel's own message loop and shoehorn in the calls to the Limn environment. So when we see the Limn flowsheet running, it's actually still in Excel, it's still using Excel tools, but it's somewhere Microsoft never expected anybody to go, I would bet. The other parts of Limn live within this toolbar here, accessing the standard sorts of things that we need to do. The wizards will let us set up data structures and template models. Limn Solutions, an engine to provide the calculation, or some of the calculation at least. A set of tools and a set of options, as well as some extra Excel bits and pieces, which are just things that I find useful and other people may do as well. So coming through to Limn Draw, and of course, here we are, good. We're in Excel. You can see by the top here, we're still sitting within the Excel environment, but there is a palette of user interface elements, which has a fixed block at the top and a set of variable function keys, if you like, at the bottom. So to draw a flow sheet, we position the cursor, and I'm going to do a crusher and screening circuit, given this is a comminution group, and a crusher and screen is probably the simplest thing to talk about in that environment. So just for the demonstration, we'll keep it simple. Position a screen. We can move that around in the normal manner that you do in drawing packages. The handles on the edge let us change the size of the objects, and so on. Continuing on, we'll select a grizzly here as well, perhaps. There's a series of icons. There's about, I think, over 300 icons in the system at the moment, arranged in various categories. So if we want crushers to go with that, we go to the crushers section and we can choose a suitable picture of a crusher and arrange those in some form for the circuit that we want. So I'll give myself a little bit of room here. And I would typically set up my circuits like this. Interestingly, there are, not that I could find anyway, there are no or very few drawing package standards or drawing standards for engineering. The Australian Coal Prep Society developed one back in the probably the early 70s, and that's what I've based this on, because most of my customers at that stage were that particular industry. But it's surprising there isn't a standard. There seems to be standard ways of doing things, rectilinear streams, left to right order and things like that. But yeah, no standard that I could find. If anybody knows of one, I'd love to see it. Drawing streams. There are streams by default on the units, but I'm going to draw a feed stream here, and to do that I simply click and drag and then click to turn the corner, and when the end of the stream is where I want it. I press double click, and that stream is then connected to that unit. In Limn, there are no connection points because the icons are quite flexible. You can put your own icons in very easily. I tried to come up with a way of making things work that didn't require fixed places or extra software to define those fixed places and so on. So we can see from our palette here the stream, in this case called stream 1936. I can change the name of that stream. Let's call it Run a Mine Ore. Comes from nowhere and goes to the Grizzly. Other streams in the circuit, this one's probably called something like, if I can find it, something called Course. It comes from the Grizzly and doesn't go anywhere yet, but we can simply extend it out to the crusher, and it's now connected. The Grizzly is connected to the crusher, and the Grizzly itself has a stream in, ROM ore, and coarse and fine streams out. We can take the crusher product down to the screen. Again, comes to the crusher, goes to the screen, so it's selecting what's going on and appears to be working. The only way that streams join in Limn is at a node. This is part of the gold prep standard for drawing flow sheets and seemed to make sense. A node is an implied mixer, and there's no model required for that part, but it's a way of showing quite obviously that there's no connection there. If two streams cross like this, there's no connection. And because the original coal prep standard was written probably when draftspeople used rulers and pencils, things like little bumps and gaps were frowned on, and I haven't implemented them. They're probably the most requested addition to the flowsheet drawing package. We can take the oversize from the screen back to the crusher. We can either join that into the feed stream here, or we could take this down directly into the crusher. The crusher has an implied mixer ahead of it, so the crusher model will see the sum of those two streams as we go. And we create a product stream in the same way. If it ends with nothing connected to it, then it comes from a screen and goes nowhere, and is regarded as an unconnected product stream. One of the options for display of a flow sheet is to label various streams. So I can click on label and add label to all units, and click on streams and add label to all streams, and then move those labels around. Got the stream instead. Move those labels around to wherever I want them. I shake a little bit, and working on a fine screen's not easy. So then typically we'd go through and name the streams something a little more realistic. Let's call this one crusher product. Both the stream and the label have the same name or are connected, so it doesn't matter which one I choose as the one to change. So having changed the label, the stream name will also have changed to crusher product as well. So this will be screen feed. Back to Excel, Dave. These labels are connected to the stream that they belong to, or a part of the stream they belong to. So if I move the stream up, the label moves with it. That also breaks the connection between the unit and the stream. So we need it back where it was. Similarly, if I move the Grizzly object it will move all of the connected streams and all of their labels relatively to each other. So it makes drawing a flow sheet reasonably straightforward. Clicking on the Excel button, we're back in Excel. We're in an Excel flow sheet, and these objects are simply Excel picture objects and Excel lines and Excel text boxes. But they've been given a precursor relative to their purpose. So _U means it's a unit object. _S means it's a stream object. _L means it's a label object, and so on. So what that means is that if you're a Visual Basic programmer, for instance, and you know what the labeling or naming convention of the Excel objects is, you can change the or make changes, carry out macros based on those names to do whatever you like. One of the things we should do early on is to save the flow sheet. Where are we? Desktop. Excel crashes often enough. I know the guy that wrote Limn, and he's not perfect, so it is pushing Excel, the friendship of using Excel, and it does crash occasionally, so saving is always a good thing to do. So that's defined our flow sheet, I believe, so we can then look at setting up the data structures that we're interested in. And the wizards are themselves template workbooks which you can get in and modify. The comminution wizard, for instance, was based on the 1D vertical wizard and developed from that. And this is the one I'll use. 1D vertical wizard simply gives you a column of data. 1D horizontal wizard gives you a row of data. 1D vertical wizard gives you a column of data for each stream. The 1D comminution wizard is arranged with size by size vertically in a column, and the various other wizards have appropriate data structures for the way I thought at least things should be done. So if we go to 1D comminution, it's a 1D vertical wizard plus water, in other words, a size distribution plus water, and this is just a welcome aboard screen with a bit of documentation. The vertical property from the 1D wizard, or if we wanted to use the comminution wizard as the basis of something else, it doesn't have to be size, although the models are set up in that way. And we can specify whether it's millimeters or inches or furlongs or whatever happens to suit. And we might have, say, 10 size fractions. Basically unlimited. You could have several hundred size fractions if you wanted to, but it gets a little bit unwieldy. The systems looked at the flow sheet and picked up the fact that the ROM-OR is a feed stream. So it's identified the stream names from the flow sheet itself, from the Excel objects that make up the flow sheet. But knowing what's connected to what lets it say ROM-OR is a feed and undersize is a product, and the other streams are inter-unit streams. You can arrange those in various ways. I prefer the type and alpha, but you could arrange them alphabetically if you wanted to. It doesn't really matter as far as Limn's concerned, just your own preferences, I guess. And you can arrange them one by one. Similarly, for units, we can check to see whether the units have the number of products we expect. In other words, a bit of a check on how we've set the flow sheet up. And each unit ends up with a separate worksheet in Excel. So it doesn't really matter how you sort them here. You can always shift the unit sheets around later on if you wish. This is probably the most critical part of the wizard. It's where we specify a unit model appropriate for the number of product streams. Because the unit models always add up the feeds, we really don't need to worry about those too much at this stage, but we do need to specify an appropriate model with one product or two products. So for the crusher, I'll start with the Wiseman crusher. JK model documented in the JK monograph, comminution monograph. The Grizzly, there's a simple box splitter model if that was appropriate, but I'm going to use the Wiseman efficiency screen and the screen, a Wiseman efficiency screen as well. You'll notice the Wiseman name here, Bill Wiseman at the JK, unfortunately not with us anymore, but was sort of the mathematical guru in the early days and, well, right through until a few years ago. Various tools here about this model gives us a little bit of information about the model that we're choosing. And that's it. That's you've done it, hit finish. Now you'll notice down the bottom left-hand side of the screen, it's giving us a little bit of information about what's going on. What it's doing is pulling template pages out of another workbook, the Wizard workbook that I've been talking about, which are now available to us. So back to the flow sheet. If we now click on a model, the crusher, it will take us to a model page associated with that flow sheet object. Similarly, if I click on the ROM ore, there's the description of the run-of-mine ore. And the worksheets are arranged left to right in a hopefully logical order, in the order of things that need to be done, I guess, is probably the right way to look at it. The configuration page lets us make changes to things that are needed globally as the configuration of the entire workbook. So our name that we gave it on the way in is size in millimetre. If we wanted to change it here, we could. Some people find my colour scheme a little garish, and we'll talk about that later, but the idea is that user input is expected to be in cells of a certain colour and with a certain style. In Excel, you can specify styles, and this is a user input style, as in my case, white on blue. So I can specify the sizes. It by default starts with an upper of 100 millimetres, so we'll leave that and just come down here, make this 1.6, 0.8, 0.4, 0.2, 0.2, and 0. So the system's calculating an arithmetic mean from those values, so that's probably a reasonable range for a crushing plant, and the text to describe that size fraction. We can specify bulk SGs for liquids and water, which lets us calculate volume if we wish to do that. And the size distribution that we're using is set up down here to let us see what it looks like for each of the streams. So if we look at streams later on, we can see that wherever we refer to size, it matches that configuration. Just a way of buffering up the data from its user interface format into something which can be used by the calculations in Excel. And all of the wizards follow this same basic structure. There's a page of configuration that lets you specify the generic wizard to your specific case. So the next page to look at is the stream data input page. There's a stream data input page and a stream data page, because often for feed streams or input streams to the circuit, you need to do some other calculation, or you need to look at the data in a different form. And so I've set it up so that there's a input page arranged generally in user format, and then there's a stream data page with the data in Limn format, internal Limn mass in each size fraction in the case of this wizard, and then with other calculations to do with making it more user space, I guess. So stream data input, we can specify now in the blue cells here our feed to the crushing plant, let's say 1,000 tonnes an hour with a little bit of water, and pick a size distribution, 10, 12, 14, 20, 10, 5, 4, 3. Okay, there's a great distribution that I got from the lab moments ago, and again, Limn working internally in mass. I can never remember what the correct terminology is, intrinsic and extrinsic properties. And I refer to the data which Limn uses as data which can be summed by simple addition, and the data which is used by the user in whatever format best suits engineering units or whatever best suits the user. So at the moment, these are set up as percent retained, but there's no reason why we couldn't rearrange that to be cumulative percents retained or cumulative percent passing or whatever. So that's the stream data input page. The stream data page presents that data back to us for the ROM stream, but all the other streams in the pale blue cells will contain the mass data that comes out of our simulation. And then that gets calculated just in standard Excel, in this case a Visual Basic program that calculates what the distribution will be given that mass given this mass distribution, what the percentage distribution will be. And again, each of the wizards has a different set of functions to allow that to happen. Moving on then to the process model. So we look at our flow sheet. What we've done is to specify the data for the ROM ore. We can go to the Grizzly and set up the model. In this case, the model is a cyclone efficiency curve based on Bill Whiten's work. It's a logistic curve, effectively an S curve. Our cut size might be somewhere around the magic 12.5 number. Even in metric days, it's funny how many mines still use 12.5. The bypass fraction is the water split or the fines recovery to the coarse stream. In other words, the bypass of fine material to the coarse stream, which might typically... Actually, this wasn't where I planned to go. What I'm going to do now is to switch to a different model. I should have used the screen model here rather than the Whiten efficiency curves. So we'll come back to the tools menu, and one of the tools is to change a Limn wizard generated unit model. I could run the wizard again and have it go through and change as many models as I like, but in this case there's only a couple of models I want to change. So change a wizard generated unit model. I want the model to be a Whiten efficiency not a Whiten efficiency screen, a single text screen model. There we go. It uses the Whiten efficiency equation underneath, but there's a few calculations on top of it, which we can make use of. So having selected those models, the system goes through and recalculates and rebuilds, and now the Grizzly has a different model. It simply uses a nominal D50, which I was going to use something like 12.5 as a closing screen. Oh, Grizzly, sorry, higher than that. Let's make that say 25, 30 mils. The alpha value is the slope of the efficiency curve for a screen somewhere between 4 and 10. Let's say we'll leave it at 4, and the bypass fraction, the fraction of fines reporting to the course is 10%, 0.1. So that gives us, based on the Whiten efficiency curve, the separation curve or partition curve relative to the mean sizes. So 99.6% of the material should end up in the coarse stream, which is what we'd hope. If we want to change any of these values, we can simply get in and modify the equation. If we wanted to clip things at 1 or whatever, we can do that. So this is the Grizzly. The screen is similar. So for the screen, we might make a cut at 12.5, which is what I've been trying to do. 10% fines is probably reasonable. An alpha value of 4 is probably reasonable as well. So that both of these models work by calculating first a partition curve and then applying that partition curve, which uses range names. So that partition curve gets multiplied by the feed vector in an array formula, the squiggles around the outside. Similarly for the grizzly, same sort of function. In fact, these two models are exactly the same model in the wizard. The template has just been copied in and the appropriate stream names and so on filled in. The crusher is a little more complicated. This is the Anderson-Whiten crusher model, which has some regression equations to let us calculate how, or the ability to enter regression equations to let us enter the crusher closed side setting. Let's say 15 mil. Let us calculate the parameters for the Whiten crusher equation or the transformation matrix. Again, JK type matrix models, and the T10 versus TN or TN versus T10 data, which comes from a drop weight test. Gives us a T10 value based on that equation. I'm using 10.5. Again, these would be their empirical models, and the numbers obviously come from experience from other work done previously, or from model fitting a set of crusher data, feed and product data. So we've specified the feed, we specified the grizzly, we specified the crusher. We can, and the screen, so we can now run the Limn solution engine. Solve. And what we should find is that on the stream data page, we have a calculated set of data based on those models. We should see a balance if we add, oh, here we go, the screen undersize is the only product. 99.999 is close enough to our ROM ore. The way that works is that the system has a convergence factor, and the convergence factor is the difference between the stream data in any two successive iterations. So it can, it'll stop. Doesn't mean it's correct, it doesn't mean there's a balance, but it means it'll stop if there's no changes. Okay, so that's given us the run through. From that, we can look at the summary page, which is just a set of tables giving us each of the streams and the various parameters that we're interested in. Handy format for printing out in more complex sheets, of course. We can also look at the data on our flow sheet. So we might have a 2 rows and 1 column, for instance, adding data blocks to the flow sheet below the stream labels. And I can look at solids tons per hour and P80, for instance. And so each of the streams now has that data associated with it. What else do we want to look at? I guess the other option here is the flow sheet, the process flow diagram type approach to displaying data. And that can be set up as a template at the start, but it can also be added later. and that will look like this if I shrink things down a little. Oop, not quite that much, Dave. So we can see the data in the data box, but we can also see the streams, and we can display data in those locations as well. So we could have solids tonnes per hour, PAD and so on. Again, we're in Excel. If something doesn't give us enough room, or we need to change the font or whatever, we're in Excel, so we can do that. We can also remove the number of decimal points, change the number of decimal points. For instance, solids, we might not want to see any decimal points, so that will show through like so. So what else can we do with this? That's the basic simulator. You could then manually change the closed side setting, change the screen oversize to look at different options, or we could use one of the tools that are built into the wizards. And the one that's useful here is the scenarios tool. We could look at changing the crusher closed side setting, for instance. I can then set up a minimum. Let's say we start at 12 and we go in lots of 0.5. For, let me say, ten fractions, run autofill, simple column, so it fills up the data input. We might then want to look at the product or undersize P80 and the recycle tonnage rate, perhaps. Flow rate, and so on. And then if we run scenarios, we should see that it puts the value of 12 in the crusher closed side setting and does a calculation. Does the same at 12.5, at 13, at 13.5, 14, and so on. Question there from somebody?
Hi, David. This is Dave Deglin from UCT.
G'day, Dave. How are you?
Yeah, we haven't seen each other in a while, I think.
Indeed.
We've only got a few minutes left.
Yes, I've spent much too long going through the flow sheet.
I've just got a general question.
Yeah, I was just going to say I can drop back now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on, Dave. Let's start the questioning. you've seen the basis of things here yet?
Yes. Okay. Just a historical note. Peter Hand was my second boss, I think, on the coal mine, whatever, where I worked, Middleburg Mine Services. So I know him well. And I remember traveling in a vehicle with a pole and a flag because of the big trucks, and we went into an underground parking place and broke a lot of lights. Okay. Should always take that pole off. But in terms of genuine sort of simulation capacity, in our research center, obviously we've been collaborating with the JK for a long time and many other institutions. We have been torn between SimMet, SimFloat, and you were involved in the development of SimMet, Limn, which we're interested in at the moment, and then Integrated Extraction Simulator, the IES, which is now owned by Orica. All right. And we've specialized in the development, as with the JK, of models rather than the simulation platform itself. Okay. And then our comminution people are working with an independent simulation platform in Germany. And then we work with MATLAB and many others. But what we ultimately need is an integrated end-to-end simulation platform that's multi-component by size.
Yep.
What are your views on that?
Yeah, I'm finding Limn is being used. Well, first comment. I've only ever used the published models from the JK in the Limn framework. And unfortunately, the SAGML model, I don't believe, has been published in enough detail to let it loose on those who don't have access to the JK. So I've always recommended that doing SAG work should go back to JK SimMet. Unfortunately, the arrangement that Steve Morell's company had with Cedicus MCC, we developed his models, which I'd love to see in Limn, but they're no longer available either. So, yeah. But in terms of the multi-component system, the size by SG approach, which was part of the coal work, really works also for mineral sands and for diamonds and those sorts of things. But the size by species wizard is the one that probably is more useful in the sorts of things that you're talking about. But the models themselves are only basic separator type models, and I guess that's what I was talking about with keeping things simple. I wanted to talk about with keeping things simple, in that the level of modelling that gets used most frequently is something like the Whiten efficiency curve. Engineering companies have a feel for what those parameters should be, and can use those models. And in the comminution space, this goes back almost to the Bruno type modelling, where you're simply producing a product size distribution. It doesn't make a lot of sense trying to make model fit a JK model, for instance, to fit a size distribution when the size distribution is the only thing you've got in terms of design. And so something like Limn can fit quite happily into that sort of framework. But yeah, I guess the IES is aiming at doing what you're talking about. I don't know what the uptake is on that.
I'm not happy with the IES. And I'm not happy with the fact that it moved away from the JK effectively, or UQ, to Orica.
It became a commercial thing through a
was
done
with different reasons. But the one thing that it has the capacity to do is cloud-based computing with huge computing power, because you go through whatever servers you want.
Yeah.
Okay. So you can do massive simulations, but I'm not convinced about it at all. But we are in discussion with Orica.
Yeah.
And the models,
Yeah, I
think,
must admit to not
okay.
being convinced either. I had a look at some of it for another company, and it didn't sort of fit with where I saw things should go, I guess. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Can we go to other questions then? I'm sorry, I have stretched it a little. Somewhere
thank you,
there, I
David.
lost track of time.
Thank you. We're 1 hour of session here, but thank you for the interesting presentation. I think we can open for a couple of more questions here. Maybe we'll be opening up some questions in the chat or open the microphone. I think someone is raising their hand, so please open the mic. Feel free to talk.
Hi, this is Barnabas Ngambi. I'm calling from First Quantum Minerals Consultancy. Could you just shed a bit of color around how easy it is then to either upload some of those models, or would those already come pre-defined?
Sure, if I can get Excel back here. The models themselves, as part of the wizards, live in find where we are. They live in a series of Excel spreadsheets. So if we look at the 1D comminution spreadsheet, it has all of the models available in a template format. And to add a model to the system, you basically take one of these as a starting point, add your own calculation. So if you wanted to put your own version of a hydrocyclone model in, then you would set up something like this. It would become a page in this Excel workbook, and provided it follows the format and the structure, then it will automatically be available to you to use. I don't know whether that answers the question.
Thanks.
Yep.
Yes, please.
So the wizards are the templates. That's where they live, and quite modifiable. I guess I'm also committed to it being as open a system as it can be within that sort of framework. So the documentation includes documentation of all of the wizards and the named ranges and what they mean and what they do as well. Several groups have made use of that. Peter Hand in Joburg uses his own version of a wizard. Sedgmans in Australia have a coal wizard of their own. Asenco in Australia have a coal wizard of their own. So some companies have made use of that. Not as many as I'd hoped, I must admit, but that's how it's turned out. Yeah.
I'll have one more question.
Yeah.
Hi, Dave. It's Andre van der Westhuizen, also from the University of Cape Town. Yeah, it's amazing what you've managed to achieve within the Excel environment. So congratulations over many decades, I suppose. But yeah, as Dave referred to or mentioned earlier, we come from the JK Summit environment that we used quite a lot over the last many years.
Yes.
So, you know, when you come from another environment, you kind of are looking for similar features in the new environment.
Sure.
And I've been talking to Peter Hand over the last year or two, and I attended 1 or 2 or 3 of his training courses. And it took me a while to notice something that I should have noticed very early already. But I recently realized Limn only, as far as I can see, in what we've done, only has one data type. So in what you just demonstrated, it was purely simulated data. And I know a lot of people refer to that as a mass balance, but it doesn't have like a mass balance when you compare experimental and balanced data and you minimize the sum of squares, which is similar, obviously, when you do model fitting and so on as well. So any
That's right.
comments that it will go in that direction where you can work
Sure.
with multiple data types?
Yeah, I'm not convinced that the redundant data mass balancing thing is a big enough market really for me to attack here. It's also a difficult one to put together in an Excel sort of framework. The simulated or flow sheet solution gives you at least part of that. What's the right way to put it? I've used the simulation with flow sheet solution work as a way of developing a mass balance and minimizing the difference between that mass balance and the measured data that you have. And where you've got not much data, which is the case for the vast majority of people, making the models do the work of redundant data, magic mathematics, is a reasonable one in that you've got some understanding of what you're doing. Unless you really know what you're doing, setting weights on data for the traditional redundant data mass balance approach, it's pie in the sky. I mean, you're guessing. You're basing your balance, forcing your balance to be where you think it should be, which is no different to picking a set of parameters and making the flow sheet solution match that data in the best possible way as well. So that's my first comment with it, I guess. What was the second part of that?
And I wanted to know, and thanks for answering that, but I do see there's a float mass balance wizard, which I haven't used. So
Yeah, that attempts to use the two product formula as a way of producing a balance. It's not straightforward. Again, it's on a much more complicated scale than the things like the 1D vertical, 1D horizontal combination type models. Handling water in that framework, I'm still up in the air a bit about as well, but it is there as an option for attempting to use at least. Yeah, and it's not limited to flotation. Obviously, any SA process will work. Yep.
All right.
More questions there?
I don't think we have further questions. And maybe one last quick question from David, because we're running out of time.
No, I don't have a question. I just want to congratulate David Wiseman on being instrumental in a whole lot of things at the JK and Limn. I think it's exceptional.
Well,
yeah, it's been a good ride. It's been a lot of fun, and in terms of I think I had a slide here somewhere. Lessons learned. The biggest buzz for me was the second license. When somebody buys a copy of your software, they're probably trying it out. When the same person comes back and buys another copy, you know they're getting some use from it, and that's been probably the biggest buzz of the whole thing. Yeah, and as I said earlier, the JK to me was coming home. Really, it was a very enjoyable place to work. Yeah, thanks, Dave.
Okay, David, very interesting presentation and interesting discussions.
Yeah, I'm sorry I hadn't realised how long I was going to spend on the flow sheet part of it, but never mind.
But thanks, David. Really,
I can make the slides available on the PowerPoint if that would help. I'll send that across. Yeah.
Yep. Please do that, and I can share with the audience.
But thanks a lot, David, for coming up to present with us and for people to look at
Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, and for looking at other options. Really appreciate that, and the effort that's gone in as well to get to where you're at. So we'll catch you around the traps. And your last slide rings a bell with me.
And I'm always happy to talk on the phone to people or to talk on emails and whatever. So get in touch, please.
Right.
I think my last
Cheers,
slide had
thanks,
something
everyone.
like that.
Everyone.
So there's the contact details there, but I think most of you probably got those. And Bob in the States, for those of you in the States, is also happy to take phone calls and talk about the system.
Absolutely. If you could, Dave, if you could supply along with his slides just my contact information, I'd appreciate
Sure.
that here in the States. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Yeah, have a good day, guys.
Okay, thanks, guys.
All right. Everybody have a good day.